Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and with me, as always, is your other co-host, John. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I got a lot of work to do. We're getting a fence put in the yard, so I've just
Ooh,
been trying to get a bunch of stuff together and moving out some brush and cutting things down just to kind of make sure there's enough space for them to work and do what they need to do. But it'll be good. So the dog will finally have a fenced-in yard. Don't have to worry about her running into the
yes.
street or anything like that. So
That's good, because you
yeah.
live adjacent to a busy street.
Yeah, a pretty busy street. So we just want to keep that, and obviously the alleyway as well. And it's just,
Mm-hmm.
but it'll be great. So a lot less stress for us to have to worry about her when she's out and about doing her thing. So plus she'll love it. She'll just love to be able to wander and be free like that. So it'll be good. But other than that, man, it's just summer's here. It's a hot one today. Thankfully, it's not supposed to stay that way. It's supposed to go back down into the 70s. I think starting tomorrow. So that's
Mm-hmm.
good. Just one hot day is fine. I can deal with that. And
Yeah, it was a
get back
hot
to some more
weekend,
normal
really.
temperatures. Yeah. Yes, it was. Yeah. So, what about you, man? What'd you end up doing this weekend?
Oh man, did a lot of stuff. I'd say the biggest thing last night I went to, it was interesting. There was a comedian playing and I didn't get tickets in time, and then they added a second show.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the Pantages and
Yeah.
saw Chris Fleming.
Oh, cool.
And you forget how cool the Pantages is. Like,
Yes.
I always think the State Theater's better, and it is probably, but the Pantages is really cool too.
Yeah.
Like all that old school architecture and all that kind of stuff. Chris Fleming, he made this joke, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ripping on elder millennials. And so after the show, I look it up, and he's 38. Dude, you're an elder millennial. Get out of here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I thought that was hilarious. I was like, oh, you're trying to look young. I see your game. You're trying to convince the Gen Zers that you're one of them, but you're not. I can see your face.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's so
funny. I thought that was hilarious. And I thought in retrospect, if I had known at the time, I would have really wanted to yell out, you're 38. But never, ever heckle the comedian. Because he has a mic and you don't. And he has experience dealing with hecklers and you don't. Mm-hmm. And he will embarrass you in front of everybody. And he embarrassed a couple different people who weren't even heckling him. People trying to be nice to him. He embarrassed them anyway. So
which is just part of the job when you're at a comedy club, and you got to expect that you could be in the line of fire, and that happens. I was when
you got to be silent. The key is to be silent. If you don't say anything, then they can't pick on you.
Well, when I was in college, Zach Galifianakis hadn't gotten big yet, and he played our auditorium at our school.
Oh, nice.
And he one of my friends voluntarily somehow put me in the line of fire without my condoning him doing so. And and I got made fun of to my face in front of the entire student body by Zach Galifianakis, which I didn't actually mind. It was it was kind of cool because I already loved him for Out Cold. I loved that movie. And he was so funny. And so I was just psyched to be there. And the fact that he walked up to me and made fun of me to my face in front of all these people, I was just like, okay, that hurts, but I'm glad it's coming from you, and then he blew up to be this freaking superstar. So yeah. So that was cool. But
right on. Yeah, it was a good show though. Chris Fleming does a lot of physical comedy, and physical comedy is kind of hit and miss for me. Sure. But it was good overall. It was a good time. Cool. Good crowd. People were into it. There was a woman behind me who laughed at every joke, and I was like, I bet he loves you so much. It's like every joke, it was the funniest thing anyone had ever said. And I was like, good for her, having a good time. Yeah. Letting loose.
Absolutely. Having a good and that's what you're there for. You want other people to enjoy themselves.
It was such a nice day. I even walked home from the Pantages after.
Oh yeah. That's a nice walk.
It was.
Yeah.
Across the bridge, pretty. It was great.
Yeah. Well, good, man. I went up and down Grand Old Days yesterday. So
okay.
On Grand Ave here in St. Paul. So we walked. Gosh, I think I walked over 10 miles yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. It was good.
Yeah, I bet your feet are sore.
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't consecutive, we were stopping and we got
10 miles is a ways.
Yeah. So, but it was good, man. It was a good weekend overall. Weather was fantastic. And yeah, that's it. So, but we got a lot of crazy drama that happened this week in college football.
A lot of college football drama. So this is going to be a news episode, everyone. There's no gimmick, so it might be a shorter than usual pod. Just FYI. I guess if you're listening to the pod, you already know how long it is. We don't. Yeah. We're doing it. But yeah, so it might be a little shorter, but I'm excited to talk about some college football news. Should we kick it off with some news from the Mountain West, John?
Sure. Well, before you do, as always, you want to find We Live for Saturday. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike here at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can also email us, We Live for Saturday, B1G@gmail.com. Please follow, like, subscribe, comments, retweet, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. It would help us out a lot.
Yes. And if you're an audio only listener, as usual, please go to YouTube and follow us there. That helps us, or subscribe to us there. I mean, that helps us a lot.
Yep. Thank you. Cool. Let's get into it.
Awesome. All right, John. So we had a big shakeup in the Mountain West. We won't go too far into it, but it's worth noting, I think, that the Mountain West has confirmed that Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and Utah State have all submitted their withdrawal notice.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of the heavy hitters in the Mountain West. You got Boise State, who just made the playoff. San Diego State's a big school. Fresno State's a big school. Colorado State's a big school. Utah State has a decent, decent success when they're not having coaching problems, which they seem to have a lot of coaching problems, unfortunately. But they do pretty well otherwise. Utah's a really good state for high school football, for whatever, which is weird, but it is. It's like a great state for high school football. Yeah, man, it looks like it's not officially been announced, but we can assume all these schools are joining what used to be the Pac, right?
Yes. Yeah. That would be my assumption as well. I'm a little surprised. Well, I shouldn't say that. I would be a little surprised for that, UNLV didn't get an invite.
Yeah.
I do think they probably were, but I think UNLV is holding out for a Big 12 invite.
You think UNLV can get into the Big 12, huh?
I think that might be the Big 12 looking for that. I think Yormark will probably be eyeing them, and they probably. My guess is that behind the scenes, because I know that it's been talked about that UNLV could go to the Pac, the new whatever Pac 2, 5, 6, 7, and maybe that could still happen, but they've been holding out, and I feel like there's got to be a reason for that. And I know Brett Yormark is a very intelligent and business savvy guy, that maybe there's some wheeling and dealing going on behind the scenes where he's like, look, you're gonna have to wait a little bit, but when the next round of realignment comes, you have an invitation to join the Big 12 and join some bigger brands, or at least a more stable conference. It will be, in my opinion. So,
yeah, man, the old when we played UNLV last, and I'll never forget it because I drove from Los Angeles to LA, went to the game, watched the game, went into 3 overtimes. Because God love him, Marquise Gray, but he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yeah.
And great runner, great football player, great NFL career, not a quarterback.
Yeah.
And we went into 3 overtimes before we finally won. And then I drove all the way back home. But they had their own stadium at that point.
Oh.
I think it was called Sam Boyd, I want to say.
Okay.
Stadium, and it was kind of a nice little stadium, seated probably 20,000 or whatever. But now UNLV plays in Allegiant Stadium, which is the Las Vegas Raiders stadium, which I think is kind of lame. That's the one thing. If I'm the Big 12 and UNLV wants to be in, I'd be like, you need an on-campus stadium. This is a joke. You can't be playing your games in an NFL stadium. That's stupid.
I agree. But I also see Brett Yormark trying to look at it with the advantage of now we get to play, and have all of our, whatever Big 12 conference meetings and stuff like that in Las Vegas. And there's a foothold. I mean, I hate to look at it from the business standpoint, but I can also see where he might be coming from it like that. And which sucks in my opinion, as a college football fan because I would absolutely want because you and I have experienced it, want my team playing in my own stadium on campus, preferably.
Yes.
That's what I want. That's why
there's nothing like it. There's nothing like
so
it.
Disappointing with Miami playing at Hard Rock Stadium or whatever. Like, and that's like nobody comes. It's so far from campus. Like, why would you want to do that? You know, when in Minnesota, the Gophers weren't even that far from campus necessarily, but it's still
no. But the student section, still, you had to take a shuttle bus. You had to show up, take the shuttle bus, get off, go in the, you know what I mean? It was a whole project. Whereas you need students be able to roll out of bed and like get with their friends and walk half a mile to the stadium or whatever. Maybe a mile tops. You know, you need the stadium in that kind of position. And it because you'll have exponentially more students show up. That's just the way it is. So yeah, man, UNLV, that's interesting, but I was kind of sad because it was kind of a nice little stadium they had. Like, I can't believe they gave it up to just play in an NFL stadium and where you aren't even making money from your own concessions, really.
Well, you never know. If by chance it does work out that they end up going to the Big 12, they will be making a lot more money, and maybe that's the long-term plan, that they will, moving to the Big 12, they will then have the funds to build their own new stadium. So, you know,
I can see that.
I mean, I think, you know, I have to believe they're playing the long game. You know, UNLV has built up their program to be pretty darn good. And if they maintain that and they continue to, you know, if they get that invite and end up playing in the Big 12 at some point, I think that it would be a good fit. And then they can keep, you know, elevating their program the way they are.
Dan Mullen's a really good coach.
Yeah.
The knock on Dan Mullen is that he's not great at recruiting 4- and 5-star guys. But you don't have to recruit those guys if you're coaching UNLV.
Yeah.
You're not gonna recruit those guys. Those guys aren't gonna go to your school anyway. So like, he's good with scrappy underdog types. That's where he's at his best. So I think Dan Mullen's a great hire. So I think UNLV is going to be in good shape going forward, even without Barry Odom.
Again, more reason to think that like the Big 12 might be the future for them, and I think it's a good fit. So with the Pac, whatever it's going to be, not that these aren't good schools, but it's just hard to say at this point. There's just a lot more uncertainty surrounding that conference at this point in time, clearly. So
but I mean, it's good for Wazoo and Oregon State that they'll have an actual. I mean, it'll suck because it's basically a group of 6 conference, but at least they'll have a conference again.
Exactly. Yeah, and things could still shake up and change, and you know, maybe some old schools might come back. You know, when the ACC gets poached, what's Cal and Stanford? Are they going to reconsider?
It depends. If they don't have Stanford, might have a Big Ten invite, but Cal's going to be out in the cold.
Yeah. Like, and do you think they really are going to like? Oh, it's still worth it flying out to go play Wake Forest in North Carolina. You know?
No. I'm sure when the ACC blows up, Cal will go home to the Pac.
Yeah. It just makes sense. So. Yeah, man. Well, but either way, it's interesting. Obviously, the pieces are still moving. It's always going to be. I don't see it settling anytime soon. It's going to be a few more years of this crap, but that's where we're at these days. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a good move. I think it is, and I wonder if it's going to stop there, or if you think, who do you think other possibilities, like anybody else that could come in at that point?
That jumps out at me?
Yeah, other than like UNLV, which we already talked about. Like, because this would bring them at 7?
No, yeah, I think that would put them at 7. I mean, they would need more, right?
Could they what? Even like an 8th member? Who do you think could that be?
I don't
know. Cal after the ACC does blow up?
Yeah. It would have to be Cal, but I'm trying to think of what other school would even need a place to be that has to. What I think is going to happen, though, if you look at, because there's still going to be a Mountain West. The Mountain West isn't going to go away, right? Because this is 5 teams out of what, 12 or 14 or whatever?
Yeah.
I wonder if the FCS schools, like the Dakota schools and the Montana schools, think about, hey, we could join the Mountain West now. Now their space is open in the Mountain West.
This is what has been talked about for years now, and they've been looking for that opening. So is this when they finally get an invitation?
And now the big schools with the big budgets aren't in the Mountain West anymore, so they could kind of run things without having Boise State beating their faces in every year.
Because they would.
Yeah, and San Diego State with their crazy skill position talent they always have.
Despite what Bison fans might think, like you would get beat down.
Oh, Boise would run you off the field. Yeah, but they're not going to be there. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. Realignment is always unfortunate, but it's fascinating too.
It is. It is very interesting. But I think that's a good point. And I agree. I think that maybe that's the plan, you know, instead of looking at other other teams that are in that mid-tier conference level, I think it's looking at bringing up some of these FCS schools that has been rumored for the past who knows how many freaking years, at least a decade. So now maybe this is their actual shot of making that happen. So
maybe,
yeah.
But some of those schools might just like being big fish in small ponds, though.
Well, we know,
you know
one
what I
does.
mean.
We know one does.
Like, are NDSU fans gonna show up to watch them go 6-6, 7-5? I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting to track.
It will be. So
all right, should we get into the main big news?
Yes, let's get into the main big news, which was a ridiculous amount of stuff that happened this week, especially when it came to the meetings with the SEC down in Destin, Florida. There's a lot of stuff going on. Now, let me just preface all of this that nothing has been set in stone at this time. There have been no official decisions made. It's a lot of posturing. It's a lot of like looking good for optics, and you don't know.
A lot of posturing. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's ridiculous, and it's infuriating because a lot of the people and organizations that have already been insanely insufferable for the last 20 plus years are just becoming more insufferable. And to me, it's not a good look. But obviously, they don't care because they know that they can do and say whatever they want, and the media will still back them because that's the precedent that has been set. And that's the world we live in, unfortunately. Until that changes, they can keep getting away with acting like a bunch of crybabies, which is, who am I referencing? The SEC and Greg Sankey. So what's been going on is which many of you probably already know, we're just here to discuss it and kind of go back and forth and ask some questions, that the SEC is discussing whether or not they want to go to a 5+11 or a 4-4-2-2-1 format. And the Big Ten has made it clear that they want to go to a 4-4-2-2-1 format. And if nothing changes with the SEC, like whether they go to 8 conference games or 9, that's their preference. The only way that the Big Ten would ever agree to go into a 5+11 is if the SEC chose to go to 9 conference games. Now,
okay. I think we should define these things just for people if they don't know at home.
Sure, go ahead.
So the 4-4-2-2-1 would be a playoff model where the Big Ten and the SEC each get 4 auto bids, the Big 12 and the ACC each get 2, the Group of 5 gets 1, and then that leaves
one
at large.
Yeah, one at large, which would be like Notre Dame, essentially.
Probably. Yeah. It's a carve out for Notre Dame, basically.
Yeah.
The 5+11 is the 5 highest ranked, or the 5 highest ranked conference champions get in, and then the other 11 are at large picks. So that could be anybody, and it'll based on playoff rankings.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, if let's say the scenario is, which a lot of people have been talking about, is that if they did this last year, like we were, let's say hypothetically, we were at the 5+11 format last year.
Mm-hmm.
The SEC would have had 6 schools in, and the Big Ten would have had 4, I believe, and then the ACC and the Big 12, I think, would have had 1.
Yeah.
And so there's that. So now you're looking at a down SEC, year, or 2024, where they were, considered down. They would have had 2 more schools in, and they would have been
3 more schools in.
3 more schools in. Yes, thank you.
Twice as many schools. Yeah.
And would have been able to dominate, and probably pull off an extra win there, and therefore make more money. Obviously, continuing the narrative that the SEC is still so much more dominant. And the reason is again, because, and we've talked about this before, and what people fail to be mentioning when it comes to this kind of thing, is that even with an 8 conference game schedule, the SEC still continues to get in the preseason polls the benefit of the doubt. And I'm glad to hear that there's more and more people talking about how polls shouldn't be taken until 3-4 weeks into the conference. So at least that's finally happening. We've been saying it for years, but it's finally happening.
Forever. Yeah.
And so that's
especially
great.
You.
Yeah. And it's about freaking time, and there shouldn't be, and obviously there's going to be those people. There still are a lot of people that are continuing to defend the SEC as if their 8 conference game schedule is harder than anyone playing a 9 conference game schedule.
Dude, they just assert it. I heard Andy and Ari be like, well, if you, just ask any Big Ten team if they'd trade their schedule with an SEC team. They say no. And I was like, I don't know. I think a lot of Big Ten teams would love to play Mercer in mid-November.
I would love it. I would absolutely love it.
Are you kidding me? If you play 8, do you know how easy it is to rack up wins if you get 4 out of conference games and you make them all easy?
Mm-hmm.
That's a third of your schedule. Like, yeah.
Well, and it's just in this 5-11 format would also favor the early polls even more, and even more so. So essentially, it's allowing the SEC to have a massive head start. I mean, and you gave a great example before we started talking about how, you know, it would be like what did you say, a 90 meter or 100?
I say it's like if you you line up to race somebody and they're running 100 meters and you're running 90. Like, who's gonna win?
Yep.
Most of the time, like unless Usain Bolt is in that other lane, you're probably gonna win in the 90-meter race.
Yep.
Just are.
Well, and so on top of all of this, with the SEC now threatening to go to 5+11 and trusting, and they want to put their trust in the committee, but the SEC wants to create the criteria for the committee. So they want to set up their own metric system without going to 9 games. They have somehow, at least from the outside perspective at this point, made it look like the ACC and the Big 12 is in support of that, because the ACC and the Big 12 have come out saying that they want 5+11, and the Big 10 wants the 4-4 or the 4-4-2-2-1, and now it's causing this discourse between what seemingly was the Big Ten and the SEC on the same page is now that they're in the opposite direction, and now it's antagonistic on Greg Sankey's part is the way that this is all coming out, and without actually saying that they're going to do it or not go to 9 games or whatever. And so as of right now, it seems like it's leaning towards the 5+11, which I like as a college football fan. Like, I like it, but I want everyone on the same playing field. And if I would be totally in favor of the 5+11 if the SEC goes to 9 conference games and we aren't using some freaking now already a system that is wildly in their favor.
And the ACC needs to go to 9 too.
Yes, the ACC should go to 9. Everyone should be on 9 conference games. It should be uniform across the board. And we do not get to just implement now a system that's even more in favor of the SEC, because Greg Sankey's like, well, we want to design the metrics. Like no, like that's not what you get to do. You don't get to dictate. You already have everything working in your favor. You want just more advantages. And I think you said something about how like it's prior to us having recording about how it's not even creating, this last year wasn't just like that they were at a disadvantage. They just weren't at as much of an advantage as they had been in the years prior.
They still were at an advantage playing 8 conference games. How many teams tied for second in the SEC? Like 5?
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't all play each other because they're only playing 8 games.
Yeah.
You play 9 conference games. That's an extra 7 losses for the league.
Mm-hmm.
Out of 4, they got 14 teams. That's 7 more losses if you add a 9th conference game, and they don't want those losses.
Yeah,
because they know, all the teams they were trying to get into the playoff. If Alabama had been an extra game, they might have gone. You know what I mean? They might have just lost.
Mm-hmm.
If South Carolina had an extra game, they could have just lost. We saw they've lost their bowl games, so I don't know why we think they necessarily would have won another conference game. So, and that's what Greg Sankey's terrified of. He's terrified to be on an even playing field because he thinks then the SEC won't be favored, and they can't live in a world where it's fair. They can't deal with it. They don't want to. The bagmen era, and there have always been bagmen, but I really think of the bagmen era as far as the SEC goes, being around the early 2000s. The NCAA had come down hard on some other schools, including Minnesota, not for football, but for basketball, came down hard on us for almost nothing. We had a tutor writing papers for players. At North Carolina, the players don't even go to class. So, we had one tutor who was writing some papers for, a couple guys, and that got us a 5-year postseason ban. So the SEC was just like, you've mentioned this before, too. They just had a gentleman's agreement. They're like, we're all going to cheat, but we're not going to turn each other in.
Yep.
And then we're going to do better than all those northern schools. Because in the northern schools, was Ohio State and Michigan, were Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State cheating? Yes, always. But a lot of the schools weren't.
Yep.
A lot of the schools weren't. Minnesota wasn't,
Yeah.
and like a lot of schools were not. So the SEC just had a huge advantage, and they had these bag men and whatever. And now, we've talked about this at length, but the northern schools, the Big Ten schools, we have bigger alumni bases and bigger fan bases and higher median incomes. And we have a lot of little donors that add up to a lot of big donors. And the Southern donors feel squeezed, and they were already giving a lot of money. They were already giving a lot of money for them. They can't afford to necessarily always give more. Some of them can, but not all of them. And they hate it. They hate the parity. They hate that they don't just own college football like they did from 2006 to like 2020.
Yeah, well, and you hear it from great. You hear it coming in some ways, obviously a little bit better, more calculated from Greg Sankey, but then you hear it from someone like Kirby Smart, who basically is flat out saying it, like, we don't like this. This isn't fair. And why do you think Nick Saban freaking quit as well? Because it was
said as much.
Work in his favor. Yeah. So like they're admitting.
Although he never admitted that he was doing the cheating. He never admits that part.
But they're if you can read between the lines, which is really freaking easy, that's what's going on.
No, they're saying we want to go back to the old days with bag men when the Southern schools were supreme, because every guy, Jim Bob with a car dealership, was giving football players, suitcases with money in them. And it turns out that's not enough money anymore. 50 grand or 75 grand to buy someone off for 4 years doesn't work that way anymore. And they want those days back. They want them back so badly. Well, but you can't put Pandora back in the box, man. The players have seen the promised land. They're not letting go of NIL for any reason. Why should they?
No. And it's funny because, of course, the two biggest crybabies in the SEC conference, as far as the programs go, are obviously Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah,
which is they're the ones who do not want to go to non-conference games. They don't want to play the Big Ten SEC crossover game because they don't want to be exposed that way either. Because God forbid they do have to play, like an Illinois or a Minnesota or a Wisconsin,
and lose.
Like those, and lose one year. Like they're gonna, because it could happen, like.
Oh, remember what was it? It was like, it's like 10 years ago now, but I remember, didn't Wisconsin win both games in a home and home with LSU, and everyone was like shocked?
Yeah. I think it was them, and there's other examples throughout the years, but it's like, this is exactly what we're talking about here. And they don't want that. Like, even if Georgia and Alabama, let's say, like, that never became a problem, they're going to see it in the LSUs. They're going to see it in the Auburns, in the South Carolinas, like the Mizzous, like, it's going to happen. And more often than they would like to, because then that whole facade of the SEC dominance there's no way anyone could deny it anymore. And that's what they're afraid of.
I don't know, man. I said that after we won 2 consecutive national titles, but you've still got idiots like Peter Burns from ESPN saying that the Big Ten's top heavy. And I'm like, if we are top heavy, why did we go 5-1 against you in the postseason?
Yep.
If we are top heavy, you should have dominated those games, but you didn't. And the one game the SEC won, they needed Mizzou to have a fourth quarter comeback to nip Iowa at the essentially at the last moment. So it was very close to being 6-0 Big Ten SEC. Very close.
And it's so funny because their defense against it, and other people who aren't even SEC fans, I've heard talk on podcasts this week, saying like, well, it's basically an exhibition game. Their star players are resting for the NFL. And
but they weren't though. The Michigan players rested. The Michigan stars sat out the bowl game, and Michigan beat Alabama anyway. But even without their best players.
And this is the fault.
And Alabama had their best players playing.
Yes. And this is what I'm saying. Like they don't, and it's probably more often than not, like, I'm not saying some players don't go out or don't call out in certain games. Of course they do. We know that. But both teams do that. And so you can't tell me that it's like, oh, well, it's just the SEC teams. And let's say if the other thing happened, like, let's say the SEC was 5-1 against the Big Ten. But and we were throwing out that same narrative, like, it would be, no one would be talking about.
No one would take it seriously.
Nobody would take it seriously. But because it's the SEC, they get the benefit of the doubt, and that's the world we live in. And that's
because ESPN controls the college football media. Because all of it they all take their cues. Even the people who work for CBS take their cues from ESPN, and I don't understand it. That seems bizarre to me.
Yep.
They think it's like a credibility thing, that if they admit the SEC isn't as good as it used to be, that somehow that's going to make people not trust them anymore. It's crazy.
Yep.
Or they're going to piss off SEC coaches and lose their access.
Which is like, it would make you more credible if you were like, you know what? Yeah, things are changing. Like, this is not the way it used to be. The SEC is kind of falling short here. And like, but it is.
Paul Feinbaum admitted that.
Yep.
Paul Feinbaum admitted that, but you can't admit that.
If he can do it, anybody can, man. Come on.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd see the day, but yeah.
Yeah, dude.
So I want to know, like, you know, I guess we've kind of talked about it, but like, let's sum it up, and I'll move on to a couple other things here. I've got a couple questions. Let's just say this first. Okay. So I want to ask you to reiterate, and you can do it just briefly because we already kind of went over it, but like, why is the SEC so defensive? Like,
the SEC
break it down.
It's defensive because during the Bagman era, they were all paying players, and only a few Big Ten teams were, and so they dominated on the field for the better part of 2 decades, from 2006 up until like 2020, and then NIL happened. And at first, the SEC was like, sick, more money to the players, we're going to dominate. And then they forgot that the northern schools had a bajillion alumni and that we care about, and that they convinced themselves they cared about football more than us. Well, we care about football a lot too. And we have a much broader, you know, I mean, there are thousands of people in Dinkytown athletes.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just Minnesota. Like, you talk about every program in the Big Ten, it has that. So the SEC is defensive because they can see that their advantage on the field is disappearing because they can't just get all the best players anymore because other schools can pay too. And so they want to rig the format to guarantee the SEC gets more teams in based on their higher preseason rankings so that they can claim superiority again and be like, oh, look, we were overrated to start the season, so we got 6 teams in the playoff. So even if those teams lose, look how deep and awesome we are, which is ridiculous. I just got to once again say, for all those years when the SEC was top heavy at first, and it was at first.
Yep.
When Florida and Alabama first started winning titles, the middle of the SEC was bad. Yep. They weren't winning a lot, but because the top teams were the best, it started the narrative that the whole conference was the best. And now that the Big Ten is the best, they want to say it's different. They want to change the rules. They don't want to say the Big Ten is the best and praise it. They want to pretend like now it's about conference depth, which actually still doesn't favor them, but they think it does just based off of recruiting rankings alone. But as we've talked about, teams recruit. You don't recruit. It's not the 23rd class is not better than the 21st class. It's tiers. There are tiers. And if you're in a tier with a team, you have a good shot at being able to beat them.
Yeah.
And the Big Ten is still in the same tiers as most SEC teams, or, you know, and the top of the Big Ten is at the top, you know? So it's a thing where the SEC desperately wants to hold on to the superiority and the money that comes with being perceived as the superior conference in college football. And so they want to rig it, and they want to only play 8 conference games, and they want to not play tough out of conference schedules, and they want to watch the Big Ten struggle playing 9 conference games and have those extra. Because like we said, the difference between 8 and 9 conference games is 7 losses for the league.
Yep.
For the SEC, and for the Big Ten, it's 9. So the Big Ten is adding 9 extra losses every year because we're having that 9th non-conference out of conference, or 9th conference game. Yep. So the SEC, for it to be even with the Big Ten and the Big 12, needs to go to 9 conference games. It's the only fair, rational move to make so that we can all be judged on the same playing field. And they absolutely do not want to do it.
So then to follow up with that, like, if hypothetically they do, let's say the SEC, and let's just also throw in the ACC, goes to 9-conference game. Like, everybody's uniformly playing 9-conference games, and that we are in a 5-11, model, and the SEC does not, get to implement their personal metric system.
Right.
And we're just sticking with what we know now, even though, and we know that that committee has traditionally, other than last year, been very much in favor of the SEC. There were just things I think last year.
They were still in favor of the SEC last year.
I know.
The fact that Alabama and South Carolina and Ole Miss even got considered at 9-3 when nobody was considering Illinois.
Yeah.
And then Illinois went out, and what did they do in the bowl game? They beat South Carolina.
Yeah. Well, so my question is then, do you trust the committee? Like, do you trust them? Do you trust them more to, like, maybe start making better decisions, or do you think that it's going to continue to be like wildly in favor of the SEC? Like do you think they're going to try to find ways, even if Greg Sankey can't get like all of his fingers in there and start puppeteering the committee even more so than he already does?
As long as ESPN is the only network broadcasting the postseason, they are the ones who set the narrative. And as long as ESPN sets the narrative, we're in trouble. And the SEC is going to get favored. And that's why when they were making the TV deals, I was so adamant that we needed Fox and CBS to also be broadcasting postseason playoff games. I thought, and bowl games too. And they're not. They ceded it all to ESPN for the time being. And so I don't trust the committee. Absolutely not. I don't trust them as far as I could throw them. The fact that they had Alabama rated and South Carolina and Ole Miss rated so far ahead of Illinois proves that they're not trustworthy. Yeah. That they still are favoring the SEC as if it was 5 or 10 years ago, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. No. Big Ten's won 2 consecutive national titles. If you had told someone that 5 years ago, they probably would have laughed at you. I said it. I said it's going to happen. It's going to swing back our direction. But I didn't foresee it being NIL being the reason why. But here we are.
Yeah. So the only way that this could possibly become more even, which I agree, but I'm gathering here, is that if the Big Ten, if like you said, Fox, CBS, and ABC, like they could, or NBC could like all be hosting their own playoff games. And
they should all have a piece of the. They should all have at least one playoff game, and they should all have bowl games.
Yes.
Instead of ceding all of that and the narrative to ESPN. Because then they just have a soapbox. Man, what's his face? McDonough and Herb Street just got up there and ragged on Indiana and SMU for games that weren't featuring those teams. They went after them.
Yep.
Which was ridiculous. What you're supposed to do is celebrate the teams that make a playoff. In March Madness, they aren't like, oh, let's talk about how much these teams suck. They're like, hey, it's cool that all these teams got into the tournament.
Yep.
That should be the narrative. Yeah. But ESPN has proven that if they feel butthurt and they feel like they didn't get the advantages that they believe that they invested in getting, then they're going to complain. And they're going to tell their top talent to complain. Yeah. And then that complaining becomes a big part of the narrative when it shouldn't be. When it shouldn't be at all. It should be something people brush off and laugh at.
Yeah.
But then, man, like I am going to call people out. Cover 3 is still saying, they're like, well, the SEC is deeper if you just look at the recruiting rankings. Can we look at the on-field? Can we look at what happens on the field and not just the recruiting rankings?
Yep.
And can you also stop pretending like the recruiting rankings are predictive outside of the like top 10 classes where it gets a lot more hit and miss? And then you get outside the top 15 classes and it gets really hit and miss.
Yeah.
And everything between like 16 and 50 is pretty close. It's a player or two here or there in the recruiting rankings. Like, oh my God. If you can't get to a point where you can separate, where you can read recruiting for what it is, then you don't understand the sport. I'm sorry, you don't. You don't.
Well, or to just that wins and losses matter. Do they not?
Yes.
Do they not?
Like, why do we play the game?
Exactly. Then what
if wins and losses don't matter, if it's just brands, then why do we play the games?
Yeah. Then we should be crowning. We should be crowning the national champion by whoever ends with the highest recruiting ranking before the season even starts. That's just, and that's it. This year it's Ohio State. Next year it's,
or at least Texas, what they want to do is make the playoff based on that.
Yeah. Yes.
And you know what? If there had been a way to put a 2-10 Florida State team in the playoff, they probably would have.
Yep. It's true.
Like it is. Yeah. Yep. They want, and it's so funny that they ignore, like we said, other than Northwestern, all the brands in the Big Ten are pretty big brands, but they're only interested in the biggest of the already big. And it's just like, come on.
And it's just it's funny that the SEC doesn't get the same treatment because it's not like they have, like, like, okay, so the Big Ten has Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. Okay, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, USC, Oregon.
Yeah.
As like the top tier brands, right? Like that's what you would consider. And so like what the SEC has Alabama, Texas, Georgia. I mean, is Florida even considered there anymore? I mean, they were.
Borderline. I'd say LSU.
LSU still is there, yeah.
I'm not giving you Auburn. I'm not giving you Ole Miss. I'm not giving you, you know what I mean? Those teams aren't. They
Tennessee.
Don't have.
Okay, so Tennessee. Let's say Tennessee.
Tennessee's a big brand, sure.
So there's 5.
Ish, yeah.
So like, who else? Is there a 6th?
No, and their argument is that those teams, once you get past those top teams, that they're better. Which again, that was never the narrative. What made you the best? The best was being elite at the top. But even if it was, it's just not true.
Yeah.
And they base that all on recruiting rankings and not on what happens when we actually play on the field.
Exactly.
You know? And it's been that way for, man, I remember going back, this must have been 20 years ago when Minnesota was playing Alabama in the bowl game. And this was before Nick Saban. This was like the year, I think this was like the year I think this might have been the year that the guy got fired, or else it was the next year or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, all the guys in the media were like, how are you going to deal with this physical, tough SEC defense? Oh my goodness, all these athletes, blah, blah, blah. And Lawrence Maroney said, Bama can't tackle what they can't catch.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went off. In the bowl game, like the rock star that he was. And I'm just saying, so like the SEC has long, even before they were dominating on the field, they thought they had some mythical Southern advantage. And guess what? It's just like the Civil War. You don't. We have the money and the infrastructure, and you don't. It's we're still fighting the Civil War, and we're still winning it.
And that's what's so hilarious. Like I've been getting that argument from people, from SEC people, that like, oh well, we have all the recruiting's in our backyard. I'm like, oh, like NIL's not the same. Like I'm like, we are. It's changing everything now that NIL and the transfer portal is the thing.
You're not measuring up in NIL. No, you're not.
Like and it's just so fun. They're still so brainwashed by this, and they can't admit to the fact that it's changed, and it's changed rapidly. The last 2 years is a perfect example.
Oh yeah.
And it's not going to slow down as long as it still stays the same. As long as the SEC and Greg Sankey don't get what they want to have things go back to the way they were. Yeah. This is all going to continue.
You mean the SEC and Greg Sankey?
The SEC and Greg Sankey. Yeah. And so that will all continue to move in this direction, more so in favor of the Big Ten, in my opinion. Not to say that the SEC is going to all of a sudden become obsolete and irrelevant. Like the playing field has been leveled.
They're equals. The Big Ten and the SEC are equals now.
Yes.
And they should be treated as equals. And nobody wants to do it, even though scoreboard, 2 national titles in a row, dominated the postseason the last couple of years, have been great in out of conference play.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we've ragged on the SEC and Greg Sankey a lot here. Now,
yes, we have.
I've got a bone to pick with Tony Petitti.
Ooh, Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti. All right, go ahead.
So I'm not necessarily, this isn't to attack. I want to give him credit, but I'm also wondering, I want to know what's going on inside your head. It's been brought to my attention by a number of other YouTube people who are very good at their jobs, do wonderful work, but have brought up really good points of like, where is Tony Petitti? I have not heard a word from him throughout this whole thing. He has not once come out to say a single thing. Greg Sankey has been going off on a million things, answering questions. He is under fire, rightfully so. But like Tony Petitti has not come out to say a freaking word, and not just in this instance.
No,
even last year during the playoff when Indiana was getting railed, like you said, by these ESPN people talking about how they don't even, essentially saying they don't deserve to be here. I never once heard Petitti come out and defend Indiana as an 11-2 team deserving to be there. He never said a word.
What was he doing? Not defending them. Like, what was he thinking? Not coming out. It's part of your platform is you need to advocate for your conference.
Yes, And I understand, like, he's very much just like the business CEO, TV kind of guy, whatever. But like, and Greg Sankey comes from the world of academia and wanting to, like, he's used to being the mouthpiece like this. What he's doing, whether he's right or wrong, he's going to go out there and do his freaking job and say what he has to say to defend his conference, even when he knows he's lying through his
teeth.
Yeah. So Petiti has not done that at all. I haven't seen or heard of him in, I mean, it's got to be a freaking year, man, at least. Dude. And I'm not saying you need to go out there and be on the level of Greg Sankey, but you gotta say something at this point, right?
Yes.
Like
you have to at least say we're not doing 5+11 until the SEC goes to 9 conference games.
And that's
period. That's all he has to say.
say.
Put out a thing and be like, if you want to go 5+11, you got to play ball.
Yes. And now I like a friend of mine on Twitter who's a fellow Minnesotan, Mark Shipper, who does a great job with fifth down college football. He does a lot of stuff. He's very well in the know with all things.
Just ignore his politics.
But he knows a lot of stuff. And
yes, he does know a lot about college football. Yes.
Well, he made a really good point when it came to Petiti, and he said that, you know, like, the whole thing I stated where Greg Sankey and him come from a different world, right? And Petiti's used to dealing with this like Machiavellian type of thing where these, you know, and like very devious, you know, like underhanded people in dealing with TV networks. So this is not, so he knows when to not say anything and do things behind the scenes. So like, and I want to believe that. And I do think there's probably truth to that. You know, Tony Petiti didn't get to where he got and doing the things he did and working with the people he worked with on such a high level without being a very intelligent, wise individual, I guess. And so I want to believe that, but that's part of it. And I want to think that he is doing some things and he's being as quiet as he is to a level on purpose. But I hope he also knows that he has to make something. He has to say something.
Yes.
And he doesn't have to go into it like we said about with like Greg Sankey is to that degree, but he needs to put his face out there and his words, and it needs to show that you are standing up for something and you're not just like this. It's not like you're hiding, because it's making it look bad. It's making the Big Ten look weak. And that's not what we need right now. So does he know something we don't? Is this the theory? You know, is this all just smoke and mirrors? And like Sankey's just like agreed to be, you know, the main target right at this point in time, but behind the scenes, they're going to go ahead and go for, you know, it's already basically been decided that they're going to go to 9 conference games. All this stuff has already been figured out, which honestly, it probably is. Mm-hmm. It's just giving the media a bunch of things to talk about. And Greg Sankey gets the opportunity to posture as like the big strong man, and the SEC is still the best and the greatest. So like that narrative is still out there, but really at the end of the day, they're going to concede to what the Big Ten wants and either go to 5+11 whilst going to 9 conference games, or they're going to go to the 4-4-2-2-1 and still go to 9 conference games, which is what the Big Ten wants.
Right.
So I don't know. So like, what do you think is going on with Tony Petiti right now? Like, is this on purpose? Does he know something we don't? All that stuff.
Like, so here's the thing. You kind of hit the nail on the head already. Greg Sankey comes from academia. In academia, you need to talk a lot or no one will listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
In TV networks, if you talk too much, people will steal your idea or submarine it. So like, it's like a secret clandestine kind of culture.
Yes.
So it could be, I think it's just as simple as Petiti is still acting like he's a TV executive and he doesn't understand you're a figurehead now. Like, you have to make proclamations and you have to deal with hostile press, and that is part of your job.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody in the Big Ten office needs to go to him and be like, hey man, you got to pick up your game. Because right now you're letting the SEC set the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh man, that worm ESPN's Adam Rittenberg. Oh man, he's the worst. He's really awful. Is. He's just terrible. But he was like, oh, wow, look at the SEC dominating the media cycle. The SEC is in control, blah, 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 blah. I just want to be like, you're the one for all those years who said the Big Ten needed to win national championships. And now the Big Ten win national championships. And you're like, oh, look at the SEC and their media savvy. Get out of here. Get out. Get out. Stop covering college football. Find a new profession.
Yes.
You're a joke. Get out.
Yep. Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I think Tony Petitti, somebody's got to talk to him and be like, hey, man, things got to change. Either that, or if he's not that guy, then they need to find someone who's that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Proverbial guy. Could be a woman, of course, but like that person.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. You know, and so, I mean, what is your ideal situation with all of this? Like, what format do you want, and what are the what are your demands, like that it has to be in order to follow through, like for this to be the benefit for not only just the Big Ten but for all of college football?
5 + 11 if the SEC and ACC go to 9 conference games. They need to both go, especially the SEC, but the ACC does too, because you're competing for bids with the Big 12, and it's not fair.
Yep.
And you've got a really weak bottom of your league in the ACC. It shouldn't hurt you to play an extra conference game at all. In the SEC, it's going to hurt you more, but you know what? It's only fair, because otherwise, you know, again, we're just running different races and comparing apples to oranges if you're not playing those 9 conference games. And if you're not, you know, and if at the top of the league, you're not playing a premier game on top of it, you know, you see Ohio State's got Texas coming. Michigan's got Oklahoma. Like, if you really want to be that team, then that's how you have to schedule. But everyone has to start with the 9 conference games. That's just absolutely essential for there to be any kind of fairness to it at all. Because otherwise it's purely apples to oranges if they're playing 8 conference games and playing 4 layups or 3.5 layups or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and I know a couple of them have tough rivalries out of conference that are good, tough games, but like a lot of them are just scheduling to get 4 wins too.
Yep. Yeah.
That's happening a lot. And that's a 30-year schedule. And I do think it's a little excessive in this day and age now that everyone else is playing the 9 conference games. So I need that. And also, I think the playoff committee, there's probably no way to do this, but let's say I am all powerful. I want to sequester the playoff committee so they can't see any rankings until they come out with their first ranking. Like, I don't think they should be able to even track the polls or how teams are doing or rated or whatever. They should be in like a sealed chamber where they can just hang out among themselves, watch football, and then come up with a fair top 25 after like a month, not right away. And then they can come out of hiding and rejoin the world. And then that way the AP poll won't influence, because you can't tell me that those people on the college football playoff committee aren't that the fact that they aren't influenced by the AP poll. You can't tell me they're not influenced by the AP poll.
Yep.
And the AP poll is a joke. It's a joke. It's not, it's just a best guess. And then they try to fix the guess as they go, you know? And that's not, you know, they say, oh, we shake it and we redo it every week. No, you don't. You build off of what you've already done.
Yep.
That's like, don't lie. So I need that. I need some way to take the influence of the AP poll away from the college football, from impacting the college football playoff committee. I don't know how you do that, but they shouldn't be. I don't think they should even be aware of it, you know?
Say goodbye to your wife and kids, your families. It's just 4 weeks, but we're gonna.
No, they can hang out with you, but they can't talk about it either.
And there's no phones, no computers. Yeah. It's just all you get to watch every week is just college football. Otherwise, the outside world doesn't even exist as far as you're concerned.
It'd be like when the NBA had the bubble during COVID.
Yeah,
we can make them like a little bubble community where they just stay every year, and it's like, oh, honey, it's late August. I'll see you in mid-October. And then they can live away from the world and come up with stuff. And then when they reemerge, great.
Yeah, I love it.
But I think if you did that, the SEC would not be ranked nearly as high. Nope. Because the other thing is, you know, we talked about this before. If you're a listener to the pod, the teams that start out ranked the highest, when teams beat them, those teams become ranked.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if the teams in the SEC that were picked to do well don't do well, someone in the SEC, whoever beats them, is gonna take their spot in the polls.
Yep.
And in other conferences, it's not like that. If a team loses, they drop down. The team that beats them doesn't necessarily pop up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a slow, gradual thing, like it probably should be.
Yep.
But yeah, man, it's really interesting to look into this year because I can already see myself getting mad because if you look at the first 6 Gopher games, I see 5 wins and a loss.
Yeah.
I see because they have 2 weeks to get ready for Rutgers and have them at home. They have Purdue at home, but that's homecoming, and it's a night game. And Purdue, they're rebuilding, you know. And then other than that, their only tough game really is Cal. And Cal is a dumpster fire. So there's a really good chance Minnesota is going to be 5-1. And if they're not ranked at 5-1, I'm going to be pissed about it. If they're 5-1 and their only loss is to defending national champ Ohio State, who is probably, again, the most, arguably the most talented team in the country. Like, yeah. So I'm thinking about that already. I'm already thinking, like, I can see us in the others receiving votes category and me just, like, ready to explode that we're halfway through the season and can't get ranked with an 85%, 83% win percentage or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like a 4-2 LSU gets ranked above us or something like
that. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, that's the other. That's the thing, man. When they start ranking SEC teams with multiple losses in the first half of the season, and you're like, what are you looking at to decide this? And dude, it's like the Auburn hype, right? Auburn hasn't done anything to justify the hype, but Vegas likes Auburn. So everyone's like, oh, Auburn's going to be great because Vegas is in here.
Because Vegas is obviously proven to be so right about Minnesota for how many freaking years in a row now.
Well, and also Vegas is trying to get even betting on both sides because they don't want to have to pay out and lose a bunch of money.
Yes.
So they're not, that's not really how they're making. So like, it's not about necessarily getting it right. It's about getting the money even.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't understand. And they think that, Nebraska is going to be good every year because they have a high win total. No, they have a high win total because they have a bunch of fans who are willing to bet the over no matter what it is.
Yes.
That's why. It's not because they necessarily are better than the teams with a slightly lower win total. Oh, I can't stand the SEC. I haven't been this mad in a long time. John, I'm going to tell you a quick side story. I was in an improv class when I lived in LA, and it was like, and like the prompt was go on a rant about something you hate. And this was like 10 years ago, right? And so I was like, I'm going to talk about the SEC. And in my head, while everyone else is going, I'm thinking in my head, like what I'm going to say. And then it comes to the guy right in front of me, the guy who goes before me, and he goes, I hate the SEC. And I was like, no, how could you? And he stole it from me out of my head.
Wow.
And he went on a great rant, actually. And then I didn't know what to rant about. But like, this has been going on for a really long time. Yeah. And everyone is sick of it. This is not a guy I even knew. I can't even remember where he was from. It wasn't from the Midwest. And he was still like, I am so sick of this. I'm so sick of the propaganda that we get pushed on us every day if you like college football.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. And it's been 20 plus years, man. And people are over it. And people are and I like to say, or like to think anyways, that the media is starting to wake up from their fever dream. Like it's not to the
starting.
They're just starting. They aren't waking up, or they aren't awake, I should say, yet.
No.
But you're starting to see it. And as long as this continues, and which is why I have to believe, even after 1 year of things not going exactly the way the SEC wanted it to go, the reason they're having this like ridiculous emotional reaction or overreaction is because they are terrified that they already are seeing certain people, not necessarily flat out saying that, oh, the SEC is bad, but even just to hear someone on the national level be like, oh, the SEC kind of had a down year last year. It just sent them into a tizzy. They can't handle it. They're like, oh no, we have to stop this because if they find out what's really going on, they find the man behind the curtain, like, oh, well, we're screwed, and that's what they're afraid of, is losing that narrative.
Yeah.
And they can't set it every single freaking year. And that's
they're losing control of it. They are losing control of the narrative.
And they can't handle like being it's not even that. And again, like let's be honest, the SEC wouldn't all of a sudden just drop off or not be like or like even they wouldn't even solidly be the second best conference.
No,
they don't even
like
they just don't want to be on the same level. They're don't want to be equal.
And they don't want they don't want to admit it. Yes.
Yeah. Like they can't even admit that the Big Ten is on the same level as we are now. They can't. No, that's unacceptable. Like, and we're both like, and then they can't even. It's not even that. They can't be like, oh, like we need to accept that, or we admit that the Big Ten is on the same level as we are, but also that we're like, but the Big Ten and the SEC are about like 3 or 4 levels above the next person. Like that's not even good enough. It has to be not only are we 3, 4 levels above everybody else, but we're also like a level above the next person beneath us. Like it's insane, man. Yeah. So and we're tired of it. People are tired of it, and they have the right to be, and that's kind of why we're here. So,
I mean, I just think if a Big Ten team wins a 3rd consecutive national title,
what would happen?
Dude, where does the vitriol go? Like, I feel like it's only going to ramp up, and they're only going to get angrier and more defensive as this goes on. And I think eventually, the rest of the college football world and already is kind of sick. It's kind of tired of it.
Yep.
I see people who are Big 12 and ACC fans, and they're sick of it too.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's that, and it's and I get tired of hearing. I'm seeing a lot of people. I just listened to somebody this morning. I've been listening to College Football Mafia with Moen After Dark and all that. And there's people that came out. Rock and Rant came on, friend of the pod,
Rock and Rant
Express. You've talked with him, been on podcast with him on their channel. And they're great, and he's great, and I respect the hell out of his opinion, and Moen and everybody over there, and they're fantastic. But I was listening to him and Moen talk this morning on their last pod, and they were talking about everything that's going on, everything we've been discussing, and what have you. And Rock and Chalk went on a great rant, making a lot of wonderful. Rock and Rant made a lot of wonderful points, great rant, but like, and a lot of it was like against, ranting against the SEC and Greg Sankey and how much, how they're being crybabies and all this stuff is ridiculous and whatnot. Yeah. But like, and insinuating that there's this false narrative that they've set and what have you. But like, yet he at the same time drops that like, but it's very obvious that the Big Ten is super top heavy. And like with like a top 3, and I'm like, why? I'm like, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about? Do you watch the games?
And if I'm misquoting or something, like, please let us know. And we'll tag you in this. But like, and we would love to have you on and talk about it, like what your thoughts are and why you think that's true. And can we would love to have that discussion with you. I'm sure you've had it with Moen, but like, we would love to have you on at some point and we could talk about it. But it's not just that. And this is not meant to pick on Rock and Rant. We love you. We think you're awesome and totally respect your opinions. This is something that this narrative continues to go through, even with people that are sick and tired of this false narrative coming from the SEC. Like this is a narrative that they set with ESPN and has been set that somehow the Big Ten is not. It's like it's 3-4 teams and that's it, and everyone else is terrible. They're like bottom run college football programs at best. Like it's which is absurd. Like they don't take into account how high the floor is in the Big Ten, and it's absurd to not recognize that.
Well, and they want to talk recruiting rankings about the SEC, but they don't want to admit that the Big Ten is the next best recruiting conference, and it's not that close.
Yep,
it's not that close.
Yep.
So, yeah.
I mean, Moen defended it. He did. He was like, "Well, what about the 5-1 record last year in the postseason?" And he started going on, talking about the whole thing with Indiana and whatnot too. But it's just it makes me sad to somewhat hear people. I respect their opinions to like still whilst kind of attacking the narrative and the false narrative and the lies, still subscribing to the lies and the false narrative simultaneously.
I think the ACC feels insecure about the Big Ten in general and kind of always has.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it from their perspective, 20 years ago, the ACC looked ascendant.
Yeah, true.
And the teams looked, the schools had been dominant and recruiting was favorable to them and blah, blah, blah. But, as soon as it's gradually, they've lost ground because they never had the money and resources the SEC and Big Ten have.
Yeah.
And then with NIL, they've really lost ground because a lot of small private schools that just don't have big alumni bases to draw NIL from. And so like it's, you've got guys like oh no, who's the coach at Wake Forest? He's a really good coach. But he can't win anymore because they can't keep his players. His players just walk out the door. And there are, and that kind of happens in the Big Ten to Purdue and Maryland. But like to the ACC, it happens to like a lot of schools, not just Purdue and Maryland. And I just think, Wake Forest had
Jake Dickert.
It's Jake Dickert now. It was Dave Clawson,
Dave
right?
Yeah,
Dave Clawson.
Yeah, replaced Dave Clawson. Yeah.
And Dave Clawson ran a unique scheme that was hard to prepare for. He did a great job. He recruited to the scheme. He did an awesome job. And then NIL came and there was no chance. He had no chance.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't keep his players year over year. I remember when they lost their quarterback to Notre Dame, and that was kind of the beginning. That was kind of the beginning of the end for them.
Yep. Yeah.
And so that sucks. And I hate that, but it is the reality of college football. And if you're an ACC fan, you should know that the Big Ten, there's a reason why the Big Ten is tough. And it's because you face NFL talent every week, and you face NFL talent every week because everybody recruits at a high level, and everybody other than Maryland and Purdue has the money to retain their players.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that just develops over time. And, I think Miami fans, kind of like Nebraska fans want it to be 1997. Miami fans want it to be 2001 forever.
Yeah.
And it just
isn't. I get it.
No, I get it too, man. Those were glory days.
Guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And they've fallen off a cliff. I think a lot of it's because, but you know what? Miami's problem isn't that they're in the ACC. Miami's problem is they don't have a home stadium advantage.
If they did, man, I mean, I honestly,
because no one goes to their games.
Well, and I feel like if Miami does, and sorry to go on like a little bit of side rant here, but I believe that if they were to join the Big Ten, which I think is probably what's going to happen, that like the Big Ten should tell them that look, you're going to now be making Big Ten money. Buy yourself a brand new stadium, buddy. Like, let's get it done because you're going to love it, and we want that for you. So like,
they're going to get invaded by Big Ten teams who want to go somewhere warm for a game. Also, it'll be so funny. It's just like UCLA last year, man, and USC. They had no idea what they were getting into, and all of a sudden they've got Big Ten traveling fan bases showing up.
I just think anyway. So I'm with you. I think that's interesting. That that's a good point and good perspective on that. And I really would love to have that discussion with someone from the ACC and talk about that and their views on that. And feel free. I mean, maybe there's things we haven't talked about or thought about or don't know about, and vice versa. So it's just a really good discussion, especially with a program that I do respect. And the difference, I guess with Miami is like they are seemingly, moving back in a really good direction. I know their defense wasn't good last year, but now you got
now they have Corey Heatherman. Yeah.
Congratulations on that, by the way. That's great.
I know.
But I feel good about our DC, but come on.
I mean, we upgraded recruiting wise. Dude can't recruit, but as the Miami fans told me, Rock and Ran, and also not the general, and then the other guy. There's I forget one of their other guys. I forget. I apologize. Was like we recruit fine. We just need real coaches. I was like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
And he's a good DC, so I'm sure he'll. Honestly, it could be a thing where it's better for both sides.
Yeah.
Because Danny Collins is a much better recruiter than Corey Heatherman was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too. I think it might end up being just fine for both, which is so, well, anything else we want to touch on now that we've, figured out the world of college football, and really all we need now is Tony Petiti and Greg Sankey to listen to our podcast and just do what we say, and everything's going to be fine. Everyone
put us in charge.
All of our listeners, we got, honestly, that's what they should do.
We should start campaigning to be the co-commissioners of college football.
Yes.
Because I don't want all the pressure myself. I want to share it with somebody.
Yes. Absolutely.
And then when there are things I don't agree with, I can blame them on you.
Yeah. Vice versa. Exactly. That's how it's done. Yeah.
Oh man. I would just say, I guess, if we want to talk Big Ten talk, it's nice weather these days. Minnesota and Wisconsin, big recruiting weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Got, I think, about half a dozen recruits apiece, something like that, between 5 and 7 for both of them. So, and it was a hot day on Lake Minnetonka. It was a good time to get recruits on the boat and get the clothes. So
that's right.
It's an exciting times in recruiting. We don't talk a lot of recruiting on this show, but it is right now. Your team is either hosting or gearing up to host a big summer recruiting weekend, probably. Mm-hmm. So that's always fun. So enjoy that. It's always fun to see who the new commits are and imagine that they're all going to be All-Americans, and it's awesome. It's a good time.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, enjoy, everybody out there. I don't think there's anything else we need to cover at this time.
One more thing I want to say.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So we will be starting very soon, John. I think even in 3 days soon, which we have to you and I have to talk about.
Yes.
Is we are going to start doing our previews for the 2025 season. So we're going to bring on an expert for each. Our goal is to bring on an expert for each Big Ten team, but we have experts lined up for a lot of teams, but not for all of them. So if you're listening to the podcast, if your favorite team, you have someone that you want us to talk to about that team, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking for experts who cover each team so that we can go in depth on every team, as we always do when we do previews. And hit us up.
Please do. Awesome. Well, this will be fun. We hope you guys enjoy the guests. We found some really interesting, really good people.
We've got some great guests coming on.
Yeah.
Great guests.
Yeah. So please stay, tune in and, keep up with us on Twitter and on YouTube and all that, because there's some good stuff coming up your way for sure. So, well, and again, you want to find us, as always, YouTube, you can find us there. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can email us, We Live for Saturday, B1G@gmail.com. And again, you don't want to miss all of the new guests that are coming up. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Tweet it out, retweet, share with your friends, your family, all that good stuff. And give us a 5-star review on any of your listening platforms, even if you hate us and you can just rip on us in the comments. We would love it. Just as long as
we will read the comments.
Yes, we will.
We will read the hateful comments. If you give us a 5-star review, we will read the hater comments happily.
Yep. So that's it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for rocking with us. If you are still here on this first or second, I guess now, day of June, we are entering. It's getting close, John. We're getting close. Close to the football is coming faster and faster. So get excited. We're going to preview all the Big Ten teams so you are ready for this upcoming football season. And I hope that everyone has an awesome week, and we will see you probably just in a few days here.
Yep.